welcome to the garden. Today is one of the last days that I'm planting out cool weather crops for this autumn. Even though these lettuce are still flowering, we can actually pull these out and just leave them to dry, and they'll mature on the plant and should produce viable seeds. These lettuce flowers are like little dandelions. Eventually they produce these kind of fuzzy little seeds that blow in the wind. So if we pull those out, you can see the individual seeds. So some of these seeds I'm going to plant out right now, and the rest we'll save for next spring. And by removing these, we're going to get a lot more space. Wow, this has a lot of branches. Look at all of these flowers. I actually still have a lot of seeds from last year. So we're going to be planting a few different types of lettuce. I'm going to be planting lots of spinach. I love spinach. And a few other things like radishes and peas. Maybe some herbs like dill and parsley. We actually only have a couple months left to grow until we get our first frost. So we can look at these days to maturity on the back. These lettuce are ready to harvest in 65 to 80 days. So these are going to take 2 or 3 months until we can harvest. And that's just about the limit. Spinach is a little bit less at 48 days, so that's about a month and a half. That's a perfect time frame. We've got all of September and most of October. Last year, I think we got our first real frost in late October. Radishes and peas are another really great fast-growing crop, ready to harvest in about 2 months, and radishes are ready to harvest in only 1 month. So these we could plant all the way through September. But let's take a look at two that are right on the edge, kale and broccoli. Kale is going to take 55 days, and that should be perfect, but broccoli takes 85 days. That means we're going to be ready to harvest this around November, which is really cold here in Minnesota. So I think there's time to plant kale, but not enough time to plant broccoli. Check out this seed pod from one of our wild violets. Looks like an alien. So before these seeds start to spread, I'm going to pull this up. These plants actually look really weird. I think I'm going to plant this out somewhere else, because I really like the flowers on these. Now I want to think about what's going to do well underneath this pepper, because this isn't going anywhere for the next month or 2. So I'll probably plant radishes up at the front, spinach here on the left, and lettuce on the right. This one will get the same treatment. I'm just going to use more lettuce. And I simply like to just sprinkle on our seeds and then mix them into the soil. This is just so quick and so easy that this is probably one of my favorite ways to plant. But if you want to be more precise, you can do rows or singular holes and just sprinkle in a couple seeds. It's always good to use a few, just in case one of them doesn't come up, and then cover over top. So that's these 2 containers planted out. Now I've got to do this one, pull some more weeds around that jalapeno. And there's one over here that I think looks fairly empty actually. It's got a cucumber that we could actually probably harvest, but that's from a different container. There's also a jalapeno in here, really not doing much, but we might keep that. And then a tomato too. But this is actually coming from a plant in between my containers. This was one of those experimental tomatoes right down in the gaps in between my pots. But we can scooch those aside, clear out all the weeds, and we should be able to plant this out with a brand new batch of lettuce. And I'm going to do the same to every single container in here. If you're worried it's still a little too hot in your area to plant cool weather crops, You can always plant them indoors in seed cells. That way they'll get about 2 or 3 weeks head start and hopefully let that weather outside cool down a bit longer. This works great for spinach and lettuce. I just do a couple seeds per cell. I usually don't plant them quite as thick as I do out in the garden. These can actually stay indoors for about a month, and that should give you enough time for the weather to cool down. But here in Minnesota, now is pretty much the last call for any cool weather vegetables you want to harvest in autumn. Peas we want to plant about an inch under the soil. So I like to sprinkle them on. That way we can space them out ahead of time and then just press each one about an inch underground. So if your soil's not very soft, you want to loosen it ahead of time. Space them out a few inches apart. And then as soon as you see them sprout, you want to give them something to climb. But they only need a few little stakes. And since we're about 2 months out from the first frost, you want to look for plants about 60 days to harvest. But we can still harvest these even if they're a little bit small, and a lot of these plants will actually survive that first frost. Now I'm going to plant out a few more containers with spinach, lettuce, radishes, and other cool weather crops. And it's okay that there's already a tomato and a morning glory in this pot. They're going to do just fine. In these last few containers, I'm just going to use the no dig method. So I've sprinkled on my seeds, and I'm going to dust over top with compost. This is going to add some fertilizer, really improve that soil a little bit, fill in the container, and most importantly, bury those seeds to the perfect depth. Excuse me, little guy. Come on, I need my hose. Gotta water our seeds. There you go, buddy. He's on the tripod. Now we can water everything in, including our little seed cells. And we are all ready for autumn. So we should be able to get a harvest in probably a month from now. And it's really important to keep up on the watering for at least the first 2 weeks. I missed one watering in this container, and a lot of the spinach died back. So now is really one of the last chances to plant out your autumn garden. This is what you should see in about a week. And in a couple weeks, you should have a little food forest like this. And we could harvest any of this right now. But we've got about a month and a half, maybe 2 months left to grow. So I hope you get out in the garden and plant some cool weather crops. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.